My boss forwarded me an email telling me to do something. I noticed the email chain had his bosses on it, so I read through the chain. They had asked him to rate all my coworkers and I from best to worst earlier in the conversation. What was something you saw you were definitely not supposed to see? I found my dad's will. I was on his computer while he was at work. Actually, am searching for his porn, and ended up finding a strangely titled Word document. At first it didn't seem like a big deal. It contained a note to each of his kids. It wasn't until I got to the last one, my youngest brother, that I realized it wasn't just a will. The start of that line reads something along the lines of, "If anything is going to make me change my mind, now it's writing this part." I realized I had found my dad's suicide note. I was about 14 or 15 at the time, and I had no idea how to go about talking to him about it. I decided to just keep it to myself. He started buying us gifts and stuff, and I would get really scared, and I still just kept it to myself. I remember one day on the weekend, I woke up in my bed to a loud bang coming from my dad's room. I laid there in bed for probably half an hour frozen. Once I worked up the strength, I went to his room and opened the door. He wasn't in the bedroom. I was so confused until I saw that the bedroom window was open. What had happened is that there was a gust and the wind had slammed the door shut, but my paranoid brain had heard a gunshot. After that, I was laughing hysterically, and I don't have much memory of the day past that. Shortly after this incident, my dad had returned most of the gifts he bought us kids, and I slowly started to believe that he had changed his mind. I never confronted him about it until last year, about 14 years or so later, but I never fully accepted that he was okay now. I called him distraught about a separate matter, and he started talking to me about depression. He told me on his own about he had considered taking his life and went into detail about it, and all I could do was cry and tell him I know. We talked a lot longer after that, and we were finally able to put it all to rest. When I was 8 or so, my old nanny/babysitter, choose which you prefer, was showing me a video of her time with her boyfriend in Paris. After it blacks out for a few seconds, it then suddenly cuts to her lying on her hotel bed completely naked, legs spread, telling her boyfriend to come get it. She jumped out of her seat, tried to cover my eyes, and told me to never tell anyone. I have now told potentially thousands of random strangers. Growing up with my little brother and single mom, we never had a lot, but she made sure we always had a safe and decent place to live, and there was always food on the table. She never really ate much. I remember dinners of baked chicken, beef stew, salmon. It was a lot cheaper a million years ago. Good food, nothing terribly extravagant, but always nutritious. Yet she barely ever ate. When I was 10, I saw her eating PB&J on crackers in her room after dinner. That's when I realized there was never enough food for all three of us. She would cook what we had for my brother and I, and she would eat the bare minimum, always out of sight, so that my brother and I wouldn't worry about the actual level of poverty we were at. I never asked for another material thing from her after that night. After my little girl's mom and I split up, and I had her most of the time, being an apprentice with stupid amounts of bills, I'd only normally cook dinner for my little girl. Then two, and I'd eat what she didn't. One night, we had chicken bits, I think, and I had a few, and after I'd finished mine, I looked at her eating hers and smiled at her, and she put some of hers onto my plate. I said, "No, you eat them," and she insisted. "You sure, little bug?" Well, I call her, and she said, "Yes, you are my daddy." I was helping Mil cleaning out her closet. All was jokes and laughter until I pull out an unopened massive. We were both paralyzed for a moment before she slowly took it out of my hands and mumbled something about the not being what she thought it would be like, and that she ordered it online. She then backed out of the room and threw it in a cupboard. We then proceeded to clean the rest of the closet. I desperately wanted to tell So about this awkward event, but decided to spare him. I was driving from West Berlin to West Germany in the late 1980s. My BF gives me wrong instructions, so I have to take an exit off the Autobahn to turn back and get back to the correct exit. On the small country road on which we found ourselves, we see a large truck with a missile on it, surrounded by Russian soldiers. They were as surprised as we were, but just laughed and waved at us as we got the hell out of there as quickly as possible. Law, when my dad was in the U.S. Army in the 60s, he was stationed in Germany for a year, and on more than one occasion they'd load up a missile into the back of his truck, and he'd drive it by himself to another part of the country. All he had was a sidearm. I think security was really lax back then. Fun fact, he learned to drive in Germany in the US Army. Didn't have a driver's license or anything. They just handed him keys and he started driving around. He was irritated when he eventually got back to the States after a few years deployed and had to take the driver's test. My boss forwarded me an email telling me to do something. I noticed the email chain had his bosses on it, so I read through the chain. They had asked him to rate all my coworkers and I from best to worst earlier in the conversation. When I was in college, I worked at an arcade/minigolf joint that seemed to give zero about actually making money, but was never in any kind of financial trouble. When I got hired, the owner literally said, "I pay minimum wage and I expect to get minimum work for it." I worked the front counter and collected money for the minigolf and sold cups of coins, or you could just use the coin changer. The till was completely busted and would be off by $1.50 or more in either direction no matter what you did. Realized very quickly that I could just pretend to ring up golf fees and cups of tokens and pocket the cash. So I'd pocket $30-40 every shift, and nobody seemed to give a one of the assistant managers let me take a break 20 minutes after I'd just taken a break, because some of my friends had shown up and wanted to smoke a bowl with me. He was like, "That is totally more important than your job." It was awesome. Then one day I walked into the owner's office while his secretary was recording figures in the ledger. I can read upside down pretty well, and it was very obvious that the figures she was recording had to do with the business we were doing. We sold maybe $60 of golf fees a night, and maybe $100 in coin cups, but she was recording $600 and $1,000 for each. I commented on the discrepancy and quipped about how someone would think we were in the laundry business, and she got really squirrely and told me to leave the office. The next day the owner called me into his office, and we had a very circumspect conversation about how much I was enjoying working there and enjoying the perks of the job, and I very much got the sense that he was trying to decide if I was going to tell anyone anything. Apparently he decided I wasn't and I wasn't, and so I kept working there. About a year later, the owner was arrested for money laundering and we all got fired. Still the best job I ever had. The mob isn't a plus employer. Would work in fake business again. I used to do a little work after school at a local comic shop. One day after school, I was bagging comics when the owner's buddy came in. "Look at these. Came out great." He had a stack of glossy amateur porn featuring the shop owner, his buddy, and the owner's wife. He laid them out all over the counter, and they started pawing through the stack excitedly. From what I could see, it looked like the three of them enjoyed one another's company equally and vigorously. Then they noticed I was there. I got sent home early with a stack of free comics. Late to this one, but I once walked into my dad's van while he was balls deep into a woman who was not my mom. Dad had a drinking problem. Mom took me and my brother to go looking for him because he was supposed to be buying Christmas presents. Found his van at a bar. Mom sent me to look inside the van to see if there were presents in there. Looked back into the back and saw my dad's bear as he was plowing some chick. He turned over his shoulder and looked right at me and said in the most evil voice, this was 20+ years ago now, and I still get emotional thinking about it. I still remember the entire thing so clearly.